If you run TikTok ads like I do, you're going to want to make sure you know exactly what you are looking at when it comes to your data and having the right columns set up. So in today's video, I'm going to be revealing the exact columns that I use so that you can analyze and interpret your data properly to know whether or not your product and your campaigns are eligible to be scaled or not. Now, you guys seem to love my last video, which was a 0 to 8K a day case study using TikTok ads. And I wasn't quite sure whether you loved it because it was TikTok content or because we brought out the gun show, but lucky for you in today's video, you're gonna have both. So without further ado, let's hop into the video. All right, so as you guys can see, we're inside one of my active ad accounts for one of my e-commerce businesses. And this was actually created after that last case study that I filmed, in which I did 0 to 8K a day in about 7 days. On this store, I actually did 0 to 17K a day in 5 days. So it's pretty cool that I'm able to kind of learn and grow and build off some of the trial and error from some of these previous case studies and these previous businesses. And while I'd love to show you the process of how I scaled this product, it's really not much different from the other one other than just trying a few new things. But instead of me boasting about how quickly I was able to scale to 5-figure days, I figured it's a lot more important to explain to you how at the foundational level you're able to determine whether or not a product is able to be scaled on TikTok. And you're not going to be able to interpret those KPIs unless you have the proper columns. So in today's video, I'm gonna be breaking down the columns that I used in order to be able to achieve those results. And I'm gonna film another video that talks specifically about the 72-hour KPIs that you wanna look for to determine whether or not your product is eligible to be scaled, similar to how there are patterns that you can recognize for your Facebook ad product test to determine whether or not that product is gonna be worth pursuing or whether you should cut your losses short. All right, so as you can see, we're inside one of my accounts. This is 1 day within one campaign for this particular business. So it spent just under 2,000 to make, I believe, around 8,000 if I'm not mistaken. But here's the problem with the current configuration of columns that TikTok offers, right? So when we're inside here, we see our budget, we see our bid. Those are two very important things. We see our cost, right? We see our CPC and our CPM. So that's good because we can determine whether our CPC is relatively good. Maybe our costs for our CPM are a little bit high and we know that we need to cycle in new creatives. We see our impressions, which aren't that important. We see our click-through rate. That's cool. We see our conversions, right? But needless to say, the default columns that they set up doesn't give us all of the information that we need to make good decisions and to pick up and recognize patterns that we see throughout the ad account. So get a good hard look at what we're looking at right now and see if you would be able to make a good decision on what you could or couldn't scale. And I think personally, I would be able to, but I think I'd be a lot more confident in making decisions if I had the columns that I usually use. So now here is where the magic happens. This is pretty much everything that I personally think is really important for you to understand to be able to interpret your data. Now, everyone prefers their own set of columns, so there's a lot of things that you can add here and a lot of columns that you might look at and recognize specific patterns that help you make good high-performing decisions. I'm gonna be filming a key performance indicator video based off of these specific columns. So if you have these, by the time you watch that next video, you're gonna know what you need to look for and you're gonna have those columns lined up so you can make good decisions relatively quickly. So going from left to right, we have the name of the campaign or the ad set or the ad. That's very important, obviously, because we want to know what we're targeting. Are we doing open targeting? Are we doing an interest? Are we doing specific bids? And that leads us into our status, whether or not it's active or inactive. I like to actually set filters up here to usually campaign delivery active and ad set delivery active so that I'm never looking at something that I shouldn't be wasting my time looking at, right? Usually if you turn something off, there's a reason for it. And so if it's kind of getting in the way and cluttering your view and deviating it away from the actual active ads that are making you money, it's probably not something you want to have there. So usually I'll go ahead and add those specific filters. Then we have our budget. Now this is important for a few reasons. We want to know how much we are going to be spending per day, but a lot of times we're not going to hit that number if we set a relatively conservative bid, right? Sometimes we might have a $200 budget or a $500 budget, and it might only spend 10 or 20% of that budget. And that's okay, but it's important to know what your total budget is so you can know whether or not you need to modify and how much you are expected to spend at the maximum. It's also really nice that you're able to actually increase or decrease the budget and the bid right here on the screen. You don't have to actually go into the actual ad group. So it saves a lot of time if you need to either increase your budget, increase your bid, lower your bid, or lower your budget. Now, these 4 columns, in my opinion, are the most important. Total cost, total complete payment value, complete payments ROAS, your complete payment ROAS, and your cost per complete payment. I always tell everyone that I work with, whether it is a client or it is a business partner or someone that I just take under my wing to give advice, I always tell them that any high-level media buyer and marketer only really needs these 4 columns to be able to make good decisions. That being said, there's a lot of other columns that are gonna help us make good decisions, but if you absolutely needed to only have 4 columns, these would probably be the ones that are the most important. Obviously, you need to know how much you spent and need to know how much you made. Right there, that alone will tell you pretty much how much you're able to generate and what your return on ad spend was. And ideally, you wanna keep your cost per acquisition fee or your cost per purchase or your cost per complete payment, because that's what the purchase value is considered on TikTok. You wanna make sure that that value is ideally below your break-even point, unless you have really good bundling skills and a relatively high average order value. Now, that leads us into our add to carts, initiate checkouts and purchases, this fun section. Now, why is this super important? Because you pick up on patterns, right? You wanna see in the account, what is your add to cart to initiate checkout ratio? What's your add to cart to purchase ratio? What's your initiate checkout to purchase ratio? These things are so important because when you pick up on patterns like these, let's say you have around a 3-to-1 add to cart to purchase ratio, then you might have an audience that is kind of borderline getting ready to be turned off. But since it has a bunch of add to carts and you look at the common ratio, then it's likely to convert soon. And you're able to make a good decision to either keep it on and running for a few more hours or turn it off if it falls short of the patterns that you're seeing in the account. Now, these patterns are going to be totally dependent on your specific product and your KPIs, but generally whatever ratio you're getting, you want to take a percentage-based value and look for that in terms of your future cost per add to carts. So what I mean by that is if I'm getting a 3-to-1 add to cart to purchase ratio in this account and my break-even point is like a 25, then I want to make sure that my cost per add to cart is under like $8 to $8.50, because it's likely that if it carries on that same pattern, that it's gonna have a profitable cost per purchase. So considering that the average cost per add to cart is well below that 8 that our target is, we're in pretty good shape. And last but not least, we have some important columns that we need to be looking at that aren't necessarily as important as ROAS, overrules, and same thing with cost per purchase. They totally overrule any of the minute details, any of some of these kind of minute KPIs, but they're very helpful in making us make good decisions as well. So we have our CPCs, our click-through rate, our CPM, and our conversion rate. Now again, these are mostly here so that we can get a good idea of maybe how the ads are doing in comparison to how our normal Facebook ads do or any other marketing platform, but also to recognize patterns among different ad groups, interests, audiences, creatives, and things of that nature. Now I know this video may have been underwhelming, but I think it is so important to understand what goes into having your foundations set up properly so that you know what you're looking for as a prerequisite to be able to scale. So in this video, we covered the right columns that you should be looking for, and you can add or remove whatever you think is necessary or unnecessary, but I'm gonna show you how to actually put these in action and look at specific key performance indicators and patterns that I've picked up after a few dozen product tests on this platform, so that not only do you have the proper column structured, but you know what data to look for when it comes to CPMs, CTRs, CPCs, how you should warm up the account, what you should be looking for in your warm-up process versus your actual complete payment campaign, and things of that nature. So I appreciate you for sticking around to the end of this video. If you like what you saw, I would appreciate it if you visited some of the links down below to get connected in some of our ecom tied networking groups or any of the businesses that have been of value to me. You are more than welcome to check those out somewhere in the links in the description. And other than that, I will catch you guys in the next video.